Hello again. I'd like to talk to those who are new to the program, Howler 9.5, about our GUI, our user interface. And for those who have not used the program before or who have used the demo and been frustrated with our interface in the past, I'd like to explain some basic ideas. First and foremost, we have the basic elements of the interface, which is the toolbar, which is this strip across here. Our sidebar, which is the area where you have some extra parameters. You can telescope these in and out, or up and down, I guess you would say, to add additional or view additional information or different parts of the functions that are available. You can close them just as easily. You can keep just the parts open that you want. For example, you might want the layers panel and one of the color pickers, such as the color wheel you see there. Also, in the color area, we have 7 different color pickers to choose whichever one you want. There's a color harmony panel, which lets you select analogous and complementary colors, which you might be accustomed to from art school. A palette mixer where you can blend and mix your own palettes. Like I said, the color wheel. And there's also a triangular version of that, and a smaller box that shows you hue and saturation and value. And you can also adjust the saturation there, of course. And then there's there's an RGB. That's fairly typical. You can input numeric values, but there's a secondary RGB that is what we refer to as a sweep editor, meaning you sweep the mouse across it to get the value you want. It's simply there to be easier to pick a color in red, green, and blue. Instead of having to click 3 separate times, you just click the once and sweep across. Very useful for creating muted colors, because since you're sweeping across it, you tend to get these very neutralized colors, but it's still something you control. Say you wanted a green, you can just sweep like an upward and then downwards arc, or if you wanted a blue, you can just sweep from there to there, very simply. It's once you've done it a few times, it becomes very intuitive. So those are our color pickers. Now, across the top is what we call the context strip. That means that it is a context-sensitive strip that shows information or parameters that are applicable to the currently selected tool. So if I had the natural media tool selected, you would get options for that tool, say brush settings, or the various shapes that you can select, or papers, or the various particle settings. Now bear in mind, these shapes that we have are some things you can get started with, but it's not the de facto absolute you must use these. You can definitely have larger brushes within the program. In fact, you can make your own brushes. Say I just created a quick shape of some sort. I can then go to the brush selector, pick it up, and it becomes a new brush, as you see there. Brushes can be any size up to the full size of the image that you're working on. You can then save these for later use, of course. This is what we call a media. The brush, as we use the nomenclature in the program, the brush itself only refers to the image, and there are options you can do various things to the brush, the image, such as storing a copy of it for later use. You can have multiple stored copies of a brush, in fact, in case you want to switch back and forth between them. You also have some extra options when you do that as well, such as hue and saturation, lightness, value, and all that kind of thing. Various other things you can, of course, do with brushes that can all be explored at your leisure. I'm going to go ahead and talk mostly about interface today, though. So, as I was saying, when we have the natural media selected tool, selected, you have all these options available to it. What's very important inside the program is that you are not limited to a simple airbrush shape. Of course, that would be kind of ridiculous in this day and age. If you simply click on this area where it says Browse Media, it will open up a panel where you have a large selection, hundreds perhaps, of all the available media that's inside the program. These are all brushes that you can use and paint with at your leisure. Things such as wash painting, air brushes, watercolor, all that stuff is in there. As you see here, we can paint with these various tools like that. And that's called the Browse Media button. If you wanted a simpler, just drop-down menu version of that, there's that as well next to it. And of course, there are all the various options that you can control, size, opacity, and all that. And as I was saying, this context strip is sensitive to the tool that you have selected. So if I select another tool, then suddenly you have access to the parameters that are available for that tool, such as this paint can. You have fill settings, gradients. We get this a lot. How to use a gradient that's anything other than just a black and white gradient? Well, you simply drop down the gradient panel and select one, or alternatively, you can go to the gradient editor, which is available from there, or from a drop-down menu under Window and Gradient Editor. You simply add entries by clicking on the area. You can delete them by clicking on this little arrow, what we call a feather, because it looks like an arrow that you would shoot out of a bow. And you can, of course, add in and edit entries that way using the gradient editor. And if you were using the gradient tool, you could then go ahead and let me select the gradient tool. Then you can go ahead and use that as a gradient. So to recap, basically, the layout of our program is a toolbar, a sidebar, and a context strip, and there is of course the menu bar across the top. Now we get this a lot, that the interface is inflexible. This is simply not true. You can arrange it in a fairly large number of ways, and this is done through the menu, the window menu, and the layout item that is available from that menu. There are many things you can do here, such as moving the position of the sidebar. Say you wanted it on the right side, but then the toolbar could stay on the left. You could have the sidebar on the right, or you could put them both on the same side by going to toolbar on right. You could have them both on this side. Or say you just wanted to simplify, you could collapse the sidebar altogether and just use the toolbar. And there's quite a bit more you can do as well. You can float the toolbar, which makes it a panel that you can move around. You can also make this a 2-column to make it a little bit shorter. Say you were on a netbook where you didn't have a lot of screen space. You can always make that 2-column sidebar, which uses up less space horizontally, or vertically. And so those are just a few of the ways that you can alter the GUI within Howler. You also have full control over, or at least a large degree of control over the color scheme used in the program, and also the look that is used to render the program, or the interface. Say you did not like this light on dark color scheme that we use, which is popular in the computer graphics industry, such as visual effects and that sort of thing, where people stare at computers all day long. They don't want a stark interface that hurts their eyes, so they use this color scheme. But if you do want to use a different color scheme, such as a more system-looking color scheme, or something, say you were on Linux running Howler under Wine on Linux, you can use the what we call the Bund color scheme, which gives you some Ubuntu-like colors. And give it a second, and it will update. So it'll tell you that you need to restart when you make those kind of changes. But as you see, we just changed our color palette to something that's a little bit different, and that's just one of the types of changes you can make. There's also the ability to change the look. Right now we are using a flat look, but we also have some other looks, such as the button look. I'll turn off flat look, and you can see that. Takes a few minutes to update. It's redrawing all of the controls that are inside the program, so it does take a few moments. Not just what you see on screen necessarily, because when you're working with the program, you tend to open up a lot of panels, and we have to go through and redraw all those just to make sure they'll be there when you need them. So as you see, we now have these little raised buttons, which are nice. It's not as clean looking necessarily as the flat look, but they do give you kind of a visual cue as to what does what. As an example, well, you see this text string here doesn't have a button, a bevel around it, because it's a text string, and had this been a flat look, you may not have known that. So that is one good reason you might want to use that as an option. And of course there are other options as well, hiding the sidebar. You might want to bring that back. Well, it's simply a little button that you click right there to bring it back. Alright, so one more option we have, of course, is what we call the compact full screen mode. Normally within a Windows program, there's I believe in Windows it's called the caption area. We used to call it the title bar, but it's the area which is mainly dedicated to system controls, such as the control box, as well as these three items here, which is usually a close box and a minimize and maximize and a whatever those buttons do. But we have the option, which I will select here, called full screen compact mode, which now combines the menu bar with this caption area or this title bar, so that you have eliminated a small amount of vertical space, which gives you more area on screen to work with your graphics. And it sort of cleans things up a little bit. It kind of unifies the look of your screen. If you're working solely within the Paint program, it helps you to focus more, because you're not looking at a title bar and all these other things. You're just looking at the interface itself, and there's no additional clutter on the screen. But you do, of course, still have access to your system controls, such as being able to close the window and minimize and maximize it. So that is just a quick look at the interface in Howler, and how it can be modified to your liking. There are, of course, some other things you can do. I believe we have still some additional settings under our preferences or our settings there, which we can make additional changes, such as being able to change the default size of the image when you start up, and you can have a default media and a default color swatch, which is what you might call I'm not really sure what you'd call that, but that area of the colors where there is colors that you can select, you can make a new default there. There's also the ability to add new default preset images that are listed when you go into the image size panel, and those can all be edited within the settings panel. And of course some other things you can do as well. Another thing we get is that users complain when they're working on large images that we only have one undo. It's never been true since the beginning of the program that we only had one undo. It's just that some users were working on very large images that did not fit into the default undo memory. So you have the option of changing undo memory, which is there on the settings panel as well. We like to keep that low to a certain degree. We default to 90 megs because for several reasons. One being that we don't want our program to initialize a large chunk of system memory just to be sitting there and doing nothing. Because when you allocate that undo memory, it is allocated off the top at the beginning of the program initialization. So it's not as you need it. Even if it was as you needed it, it would quickly use up that memory. So we wanted to keep the maximum amount of undo memory kind of to a minimum. Also, that memory is not available to animations, so we wanted to balance that with the amount of animation frames you could create. So bear that in mind when you set your undo memory. balance it between how big of an image you're going to work with, and if you're going to be using animation frames, and also how much system memory you want to dedicate to actually running Howler. Uh, Balance that with how many undos you want to have available to you. Alright, so those are just a few of the things that I would like to talk about our users who have not understood some of the fundamental parts of our program. And there are a few other things. There's for users of such as French or German, where a comma is used instead of a period. There have been in the past some areas where those functions where we saved out a text file, for example, as a settings file, those did not operate on these systems. And we did finally add that as an option. So just be aware that's in the program settings as well, if you have trouble there. And I think I'm wrapping up now. Thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful for new users. One other thing I would like to cover is that we have a few shortcuts that I would like to cover. We get this a lot also, how to use the hand tool. Why does the hand tool not work? Well, it does actually work. It just doesn't work quite the way you expect it to work, probably, if you've used other types of programs. That's because we've made it a little bit different than the other programs. Instead of going over here and clicking a hand tool, which would unselect your whatever you happen to be working with, say you were on the text tool, you clicked on the hand tool, when you're done with it, you'd have to go back up here and select the text tool. Well, we did this a little different. We just click on it, our hand pops to the middle of the screen, we drag anywhere we want, we let go, and the tool pops right back where we were. This tool we had selected is still selected, and we didn't have to do anything more. So it's sort of a shortcut in a way, if you think about it that way. It's just you don't have to click on it, go over here, drag around, then go back over here and click on the tool you had. You just click, drag, and then suddenly you have the tool back that you had. Like two or three less steps there that you have to deal with. The alternative to that, and we've also been asked, or we've heard a lot about complaints about not having scroll bars in the program. Well, this is true. We don't have them, and there's a good reason for that. Is another optimization that we wanted to make in the program early on. We felt that scroll bars, for one thing, you have to do two different things to scroll around in an image. You'd have a scroll bar on the say on the right, and then another one on the bottom. You'd have to implement, or you'd have to work with those separately. That's two separate actions just to scroll to a different place in the image. And also, those scroll bars actually took up a lot of space on screen, and we wanted to maximize the amount of screen space we had for our imagery. So that is another reason we don't have scroll bars. To get around that, we have a keyboard shortcut, which is Control plus Shift. You just simply press Control and Shift, and then you can simply scroll around. And if you're on a mouse-based system, you can also use the right mouse button, using that same Control Shift combination, and then you can zoom in and out. So those are the keyboard shortcuts for scrolling and panning and zooming within your image. Also the same for this hand tool. If you right click on that, instead of left clicking on that, you can zoom instead of panning around. So alright, hope that's been helpful. That is some of the fundamental differences between Howler and other programs, like such as the way the panning and zooming works. And I've hopefully also explained how our interface is laid out, so that you can quickly make changes to the layout, such as collapsing the sidebar or moving it to one side or the other. Say I wanted it on the left or the right. And also that you can float the toolbar and move it anywhere you like. In fact, when you exit the program and come back in, that should be right where you left it, which is a nice optimization as well. And so hope you enjoyed watching. Thanks for watching, and talk to you later more about Howler and TTFN.